and welcome to Talking Codswallop. And I'm yet again lucky enough to have a returning guest for this episode. And I always love having returning guests because you get, to see where the person's up to in life and how things have been going for them since you last spoke to them. So it's always great fun. So on this week, we have a returning guest, Mr. John Bukowski. John, how are you doing?
Very good, James. Thanks for having me back. Always a pleasure.
Well, I was looking back, and thank you for coming back on, but I was looking back and worked out it was August the 28th last year, around that time that we kind of published our episodes. It must have been some point in maybe early August that we did our interview. But wow, time flies. It's terrifying in some respects.
Yeah, it does.
How much has changed in a year, considering that we'd probably be quite deep in things like COVID at that point. I mean, obviously it's still bouncing around, but.
Right. Yeah, well, that's COVID was on everybody's mind for about 2 years. So yeah, it would have been in August of last year. Would have been still quite an issue.
Still very prevalent, and since then many other things have become prevalent, some better than others. So what I would say, John, is, and we kind of touched upon this when we were talking just before we recorded, that for somebody somewhere, or many people somewhere, this could be their first episode. So they've never ever heard Talking Codswallop. They've never ever heard, about your great work. So could you be so kind as to do an introduction? Tell us, for those who are new and maybe those who are old who just want to hear again, a bit about yourself, please.
Sure. I like to joke that I'm the most overeducated fiction writer in America, or maybe the world. I started my career as a practicing veterinarian, and I practiced in Michigan for small animals, dogs and cats, for about 7 years. And then I transitioned to doing public health work. I got a master's and then a PhD in public health epidemiology, which, thanks to COVID, some people actually know that means disease detective, not skin doctor. Skin doctor or bug doctor, I get various ones. And I did that for about 20 years, and I transitioned from that to medical writing. So I was basically writing journal articles and thought pieces for editorials or website content, things like that, consumer handbooks. And I was doing that as a contractor, and right around 2008, when the Great Recession hit, I lost a lot of my clients because they just weren't paying anybody to do anything. Mm-hmm. And any writer will tell you, and I was a medical writer at that time, but any writer of any kind will tell you they always want to write the great American novel, or the great English novel, or what have you, a Lithuanian novel. But I finally had an opportunity to do it because I had time. My wife was still working, so we had some money coming in. So I said, you know what, if I'm going to do this, I should probably do it. And about 6-7 months, I drafted my first novel. It's still sitting on my computer somewhere, and probably always will be. It's what Stephen King would call a trunk novel, but it got me going.
So you've still got it on your computer. That's
it's still there. I take a look at it every once in a while.
I've got to ask. I'm going to interject to this point, John. Would you ever publish it? If you say you made a few tweaks to take it to the level, I'm assuming that's why it kind of sits there. That it's maybe not hit quite the level you now. Right. Would you tweak and release?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a matter of. And I think this becomes, as people become more popular, work becomes more popular, it's easier and easier to do that. Because right now I've got other things that are higher quality. And I shouldn't say that so much as more professional. Because that was my initial novel that I'd ever written. And I enjoyed writing it, but it would need a lot of work, and I would certainly consider that if an opportunity arose. But anyway, that got me started. And so even when business picked up, in my medical writing, I kept writing some short stories and started work on a couple other novels, got started and stopped, started and stopped. And then I completed another novel around 2014, 2015, and that still has yet to be published. So when people say, is this your first book? Because you've published a book, you go first one published or first one that I wrote. And because most authors, I mean, if you talk to anybody, very successful, best-selling authors, they'll tell you, I wrote 7 books before I got my first one published, or I wrote 6 books or 9 books or whatever. So there's a lot of those still sitting around, and I work on them every now and again. But finally, in 2022, actually in 2021, a small publisher in Indiana here in the United States got interested in a novel I'd written called Project Suicide and wanted to publish it. And that was my first published novel. That came out in, as we mentioned, 2022, I think around May. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of a political techno thriller. It's the story of how a cure for Alzheimer's disease gets perverted into an assassination drug that caused people to commit suicide. And just recently, this past probably April, my second novel has come out through the same publisher, and that one is called CheckOut Time, which is available now through Amazon and every place really. And it's the story of how of a extortion bomber who's looking to make money from hotel chains. Pay me or I'm going to bomb your hotels. And he gets pursued by a beautiful FBI agent and a handsome government researcher until he turns the tables and the hunters become the hunted.
Because, I mean, to just go back to just when you mentioned the entire, the outline for Project Suicide,
right.
I mean, that's why we had you on the first time. And I remember loving the story, the novel at that point. I have had a chance to read it, but I absolutely love just listening to the outline. Grabs you. It does. It honestly, and I don't say that I'm not blowing smoke, as they say. It really does grab you.
Well, it is what they call in Hollywood. It has, it has legs to it.
Yes.
It has a high concept that kind of catches the imagination.
I still ask the question: how's it not a film or a TV series or something? Because that would lend itself wonderfully.
Hey, if you know anybody in the business, because the biggest issue with those, and I think almost every author would love to have their work made into a treatment for a movie, but or a TV series or what have you. But it's a matter of getting it in front of the right people.
See, Project Suicide has Amazon written all over it to me. It's like a running Amazon series, kind of in the vein. Well, to be fair, I was just you knew it, but in the vein of like the kind of like the work they did with the Jack Ryan series. I could see that kind of working really well. So what I'm going to ask, John, is tell me how you made the shift. So obviously you've written Project Suicide,
right?
Which is a great novel. But how did you then change your focus and find the time and the inclination? Because obviously you will be tired from writing that. It'll get you. How did you get the drive to write your next novel?
Well, that's the thing, is that a lot of people, this is their idea of how a novel is written. An author goes off to a cabin for 2 months, writes a bestseller, comes back, sends it to a publisher, and, collects $1 million. Mm-hmm. That's not quite how it works. Fiction writers.
Can I just check? Do you collect the $1 million though?
No, I'm still waiting for that. But any writer worth his salt is constantly working on a day-by-day basis on something, whether that's short stories, whether that's reviving a novel that they have, whether that's writing something new. I always say you got to treat it like a business and a hobby. It's a business because you try to do it every day, like a plumber or a carpenter. You're working every day, but it has to be thought of like a hobby because you have to do it for the love, because the paychecks are few and far between. Mm-hmm. So you're always working on something. And at the time that I was getting Project Suicide published, I had recently completed Checkout Time.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, there are several other novels that I have in various drafts. Some are completely finished, and I'm putting them through a third or fourth revision. Others are almost finished. But you're constantly have things in the pipeline. But I'll tell you, the genesis of Checkout Time, the idea came to me even before I was doing fiction writing. I was on a business trip, and I looked up at the ceiling of my hotel room. I was on the fourth floor, which was the top floor. And there was a trap door in the ceiling. And I thought, yeah, you could put something in that. What could you put in that?
That's quite a terrifying but realistic thought. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm also starting to think you're mind reading me, John, because that was going to be my question. Where did all this come from? And you just go bam, straight to saying it.
Well, that's the idea. It's writers are basically great what if people. Mm-hmm. What if you put something in this trapdoor? And what could you put in it? I mean, you could put a mob money, and you could have the trapdoor open, and the mob money would fall at a guy's feet, and now he's involved with the mob chasing him. So you have a kind of a crime thriller. Mm-hmm. You could have it be government secrets, and now you have an espionage thriller, a hard drive or something that falls out. My mind, and this will tell you something about my personality, jumped immediately to bomb.
But I would say that's probably quite a realistic thought.
Right.
I wouldn't say it's too. I wouldn't say it's too. Or it doesn't suggest there's a problem you're thinking. I think you're actually thinking with a realistic mind.
Well, I also grew up as a bit of a pyro. I love firecrackers. Anything that burned or blew up. I kind of really went toward that. So to me, bomb. Okay, put a bomb in there. Well, why would you put a bomb in there? You could just be a nutball. You could be what? And there was a movie that came out about 45 years ago that I always liked that not many people have seen called Roller Coaster.
I've heard of that.
It was a 1970s thriller. Had George Segal and a couple other good people in it. And it's all about a guy, extortion bomber, extorting money from entertainment group, people who have roller coasters and amusement parks. And I think that taps into a very primal thing with people. How safe are amusement park rides? And so I said, extortion. Hotels, just like amusement parks, people go into them without much thought of their safety. They assume everything is safe. What if it's not?
Mm.
And
it's
so
true. It's a bit like getting into a plane. We always assume and pray that everything will be fine and dandy.
Right.
But we don't really know because I guess as you're alluding to, we are at the whims and the safety checks of somebody else, an entire other team.
Exactly. And unlike an airplane, a hotel room, there is no screening procedure.
Oh, God, yeah. You're going to turn me paranoid.
You can bring anything you want in there. You could bring a backpack full of plastic explosive. You could bring a backpack nuke. No one's going to check.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, okay, perfect. These people are vulnerable. Hotel chains are vulnerable, and perfect thing for a arsonist or a mad bomber, as it will, who wants some money quick. And that was what started me going down Checkout Time.
Well, what I always like with kind of your work, to be honest, John, is you're seeing a level of reality to what you're creating. And sadly, when I thought about Checkout Time, I was thinking also that you hit the nail on the head perfectly when you said about the fact that there's no real, safety protocols for a hotel. And unfortunately, we saw that it was Vegas, wasn't it? I think where there was a shooting, if memory serves me, with the guy gunning. Still my mind boggles how on earth he got so much artillery, into a hotel room, but it obviously shows that it can be done, that there is no real check of,
Yeah,
of
they
bags.
just,
And
if you walked in with that backpack full of explosives, all they would say to you is, here's your room key, the elevators are over there.
mhm.
It's you don't get, there's no bomb sniffing dogs, there's no police patting you down, nothing. And so you're right, that's a vulnerable industry, which made me think it would be a prime target for an extortionist.
And on top of, obviously, you've drafted and created this great story. How does the characterization for these people come into place? What is there anything that kind of influences you, the genesis of the characters?
Sure. Well, there are, I would say, two protagonists in it. The main one is my government researcher, and that's a little bit autobiographical, because I have been a government researcher. I've worked in state government. I've worked in the federal government in environmental health and epidemiology. And so I drew on that a little bit. Now, the man's name is Thomas Tomasinski, which naturally he gets stuck with the nickname, which he does not like, Tom Tom.
I was going to say, yeah.
And so he's Tom Tom, and so he's my male. He's a bit of a ladies' man, which is something I never really was. But
I find that, I was just going to say, John, I find that slightly hard to believe, because looking at the amazing, I mean, the thing that gets me with you is, and I said this when we first ever spoke, and it still hits me to this day, you have one hell of an amazing kind of backstory, yourself, all the things you've done, on top of the fact that you also do bits of kind of stage work and acting. No one can ever accuse you of not having, too many, quivers and arrows sort of thing. You're an incredibly talented individual.
Well, thank you. But so that character was a little bit autobiographical. And my other protagonist is a FBI agent. Now, she's a beautiful young lady, about 28, where her good looks are almost a detriment, because she's in a man's world, law enforcement, and her name is Sally Butterworth. So naturally, she gets the nickname Sally Pancakes. And Sally Pancakes and Tom Tom kind of have a mutual attraction, but Sally's all business. And then they get caught up in this thing with the extortion bomber, who we know only by the pseudonym Conrad Hilton.
Oh, very good.
When he sends in his tapes and stuff, telling them to follow his instructions, is Conrad Hilton. And so they're chasing Conrad, and eventually Conrad takes interest in Tom Tom, loves the name, and now he's chasing Tom Tom, and it goes back and forth. And does he get his money? Does he not get his money? Are there more hotel bombings? There's all this stuff that happens. One thing that I really liked about writing it, and the writing in this particular one, sometimes writing is really hard. I mean, it's always hard, but sometimes it's really hard. You got to draw it out. It came really easily for checkout time. And I could hear the characters in my head. I could see the scenes. But the most fun about doing it, I think, was the research I got to do. Because, like I say, with a guy who's a bit of a pyro, I got to look up how you make napalm at home. You can make it at home.
Please don't tell us how. And I'm hoping the FBI isn't like tracking your every move.
They're probably watching my somewhere. But how to make thermite? You make thermite at home, a highly combustible, intensely burning. How to make plastic explosive, things like that. And I took the research a little farther, and because I haven't
admitting to anything. Hang on, John, you're not admitting to anything. That's going to get you in trouble.
No, I didn't take that research any farther, but I went with my research a little farther than I typically do. I knew it was I had an FBI agent, which would involve me being with inside FBI offices, FBI field offices. Two of them in particular were going to feature in the story. One was in Knoxville, the field office in Knoxville, and the other was the field office in Cincinnati, Ohio, because my characters basically go between southern Ohio and eastern Tennessee. And for those of you who don't know, an FBI field office is like a police headquarters for an area. The FBI has field offices in big cities that cover the entire country. I think there's about 25 field offices. And then there's smaller substations called resident agencies. But I knew that my characters were going to be inside these two field offices. And typically, we've all seen enough television and movies to get an idea in our heads what an FBI field office inside would look like. I mean, Silence of the Lambs, you see it in, Michael Mann's Manhunter, TV shows like CSI and the FBI and things like that. So you could get by with just basically using that, let the audience fill it in. But I thought it would be nice to go the extra mile and see if I could actually get inside these places and take a look and have a tour. So I contacted both field offices, the Knoxville and Cincinnati field offices, and the Cincinnati field office said no. The special agent in charge, and they're all special agents, they're not just agents and special agents, they're all special agents, but the special agent in charge of that field office said no. And Knoxville, they said, sure, when do you want to do it? So,
firstly, I'm very impressed by your guts to even reach out.
Yeah, and it's quite simple. You just contact their public information person, and there's emails listed. And very nice lady gave me a 1-hour tour of the Knoxville field office. I met the special agent in charge, talked with the armorer about what kind of weapons they use, saw the command post where they do day-to-day interaction with the public. The people handle calls and coordinate. It's all 4 floors, and got some very nice material to dot within the book so that people get that behind the scenes feeling, that feeling that I'm actually looking at the FBI office. And in some instances you are, because it was my experience that got fed into it. And that's the thing about doing research for a novel. I do a workshop on researching novels that I'm giving this summer. I gave it last summer as well. And research really is the spice in the soup. It is the thing that gives the person the feeling, this guy's authentic. He knows what he's talking about. You don't need a lot of it, but you need enough for people to say, I'm going to believe this, and now I'm going to follow along.
And I guess because if you are doing the correct level of research, for anyone who's reading it, it becomes something they can get more. Well, they will buy into it, as you kind of say it,
right?
And they will feel they're living it. I mean, I've got to also, again, what really impresses me on the content in the FBI is you got to know you got a yes, but obviously the beauty is that, I guess if you look at it from the FBI's point of view, they will do some deep research into you to make sure you are who you say you are. So.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think it's funny when I was talking to people like the armorer or the people in the, the radio command post and things like that. My host would say, "This is Dr. Bukowski. He's writing a book, and so I'll let you know he's a writer. Watch what you say." Because he's going to write it down.
Yeah,
potentially,
it will end up being in.
Right. Don't say anything you don't want in print.
In history forever. I've got to ask: did you have to run anything by them beforehand?
No, all I had to do was show my credentials at the way the Knoxville field office is set up. It's a very beautiful building, 4-story building. It's a park-like setting, and outside there's a gate with a little guy in a kiosk. And you show them your credentials, give them a driver's license and stuff, and then they give you a day pass.
Mm-hmm.
And you clip that on, and they open the gate for you. Now you walk down a pathway. That was quite pretty. There was it was summertime. There was bushes on the side and some flowers and stuff. And then you walk up to the main doors, and you open the main doors, and you're in this lobby that just projects power and respect. It's got a marble tile floor where that's a mosaic of the FBI seal gleaming at you. The walls are kind of a dark mahogany paneling. And along one side, there's the Wall of Heroes. All the agents who have died in line of duty are projected there. And then there's benches around the side, leather benches. And so when you come in, it's quite impressive and a little intimidating. And you wait there until they come fetch you and take you around the first floor and second, what have you.
That is how I can tell you're an author and a very good one, because you are painting for me an incredibly good pitch that I can visualize in my mind. So but my other kind of thought is, obviously, you got in because you obviously would check who you are, and they see you are who you say you are, etc. Do you have to give them a copy of the novel in advance?
No, that's the thing.
Really?
Is at the time the novel was in a draft form, and I told them I was going to backfill some information that I got from the tour on there, and there was never any request. I told them right up front, I said, I am not going to portray the FBI in a bad light. Mm-hmm. That is not my intention, and I don't think I will do that. And I did not. And that was fine. They didn't seem to need to approve it or have a desire to approve it.
Interesting. I thought they'd be like really going at you for information, but no, that's obviously they recognized you as being a trustworthy, right person. So that's a good thing.
And I think the FBI realizes, just like the Office of the President and other things, British Prime Minister, it's kind of public domain. Mm-hmm. They are well-known, highly publicized organizations and people, and you can basically say what you want about them with it's like, high-profile politicians and sports figures and stuff. And there's not too much they can do if you don't outright libel them.
Was there any, you could probably go into so much detail, was there anything that kind of surprised you when you visited an FBI office?
I'm trying to think. Not particularly. The one thing that was a little surprising is that I got the impression from watching TV shows and stuff like that agents, government agents, basically could choose their own weapons. And I was told by the armorer that is not the case. That for the FBI, they are trained in 3 things: a Glock 19 pistol, mm-hmm. a Remington pump shotgun, and the AR-15 M16 platform for mm-hmm. a rifle. And that's all they use. You cannot, for example, carry a different kind of pistol, or revolver, or a Smith & Wesson automatic or whatever. You carry a Glock 19. And so that was a little surprising to me. But other than that, it was kind of as I envisioned in my head, which says that other people who have done movies and TV shows and stuff about the FBI do a pretty good job.
That's good to know. And you weren't led into like an X-Files style spooky basement, or if you were, you probably can't tell me about it.
No, it's like I said, it was a 1-hour tour. The most impressive thing was that lobby. A lot of it looked just like any government office I've been in. Mm-hmm. Computers there. and they had a command post that had a real wall of like TV sets, so that if there was a hot thing going on, they could follow it all over the world. That was a little bit impressive too.
Mm.
But other than that, it was government businesses, and I've been in U.S. EPA, I've been in state government. Government offices look like government offices.
And I'm going to ask, because I'm a food, I love food. Did they feed you?
No, they did not. They asked if I wanted a cup of coffee. I think I got a bottle of water.
Right. Well, that's better than nothing. There are some
Yeah.
government places you can go to here where I kid you not, they cannot even give you water.
Wow.
They're not allowed. It's shocking. But it's not about us. It's about your wonderful work. So you've got to do great research and see the FBI. Now, hotel-based research is probably something a person would think they could do quite easily. Anyone could do, because it's, it's about a hotel. But did you have to go further than just using your own knowledge of someone who, has been someone going in as a guest at a hotel?
Right. Well, that's one of the things that I teach in my research workshop, is that you don't always have to do research. You can let the public's imagination fill it in, because we've all been in a hotel room. I mean, I travel for business. Other people travel for business or for pleasure. You've all been in hotel rooms. We've seen hotel lobbies. We've seen all of those things. What I did do is I did research a little bit into commercial fires and the defensive systems that hotels have set up to combat them, the way everything is compartmentalized, and how the systems are set up for extinguishers and overhead water sprinklers.
Yeah.
I did research some into that, because I have to have my antagonist, my villain, figure out ways to defeat that.
Mm-hmm. And how did you do that? Was that by researching off your own back, say, on the internet, or was that actually speaking to people in the business?
It's a combination of things. It's varying the types of explosives and flammable materials used. Some basic physics, like fire likes to rise, likes to run up things. And some of it is exaggerate the ability to defeat the safety systems, because the safety systems are pretty good. That's why there's not a lot of hotel fires, commercial fires, by and large, which is good for people to know. But, writing fiction is kind of like being a con man, because
I love that. Oh, John, if I could take anything from the conversation that I'd love to copy. I love talking to you anyway, but that's something I would love to try and use in the future, because that's a brilliant quote.
We're both in the business of lying, making stuff up. You make up a story, and that's why the little bit of research that you do is important, because it sets the hook. It makes the person say, "Wow, this guy knows what he's doing." Now, later on, you're going to feed them not factual stuff, things that are in there not because they're factual, but because they make for a good story. They make for good action, climactic action. And once you've got them hooked with the lies that they can believe, because every con man will start off by telling you things that you can believe. That's true. Later on, they will, once they've got their confidence, which hence the name, they feed you the things that aren't so truthful. So that's what you leave it to the reader to figure out what's factual and what's not. And hopefully, if you've got the story going good, they won't even care to check.
Yeah, that's very, very true. Very true. I like that. That's a very good point. I remember, I do remember, John, asking you when we discussed Project Suicide all those moons ago. if you could cast, because we kind of touched upon it, if you were going to make this into a film or a TV show, TV series, who would you cast? Can you give us anything without giving the characters away, if you understand what I'm saying?
Well, as far as the female Sally Butterworth, Sally Pancakes, I would think you'd want somebody like a what's her name from Silence of the Lambs? I'm blanking out.
Jodie Foster.
Jodie Foster. Somebody like that, as attractive as that, but with a little bit of a harder edge. Because Jodie Foster played the young FBI agent as rather subservient, whereas Sally Butterworth is very much, she recognizes she's fighting in a man's world, and she fights kind of like a man. You know, she strives for what she thinks she deserves, the recognition. She's all business in a lot of respects. So it would be somebody like Jodie Foster, but with a harder edge. As far as Tom Tomasinski, I haven't really thought about this, but like I said, maybe like a Brad Pitt or a Keanu Reeves, kind of a relaxed ladies' man. There's somebody who's very comfortable in their skin. And the kind of personality that guys like to talk to and women like to go to bed with.
Very cool. I like it. But the ultimate favorite casting.
Yeah.
Probably. Yeah. And I would say the favorite, probably maybe for the author, you can tell me if I'm wrong, the villain.
The villain, I'm afraid if I say too much about the villain, it's going to give it away because...
Okay, we'll say no. We can leave it there, but I'm just going to ask, do you prefer writing a villain or a hero?
I think it's more fun. This goes for acting too. By and large, it's more fun to play the villain because the villains are can be very interesting characters. Any good villain is a very interesting character. Think Hannibal Lecter. Think the shark in Jaws. You know, there's a lot going on with that, or behind the mind of that. And a good villain should almost be a little likable in parts. Should be entertaining. In this case, my villain is very smart. And that's part of how he can accomplish what he accomplishes. But it's a lot of fun to both portray and to write villains because they're so meaty. There's so much behind them. You know, they've always said, you know, no villain thinks he's the bad guy. To him, he's doing what he needs to do. He's doing what is appropriate for him. Or his organization, and he sees himself as justified. Ends justify the means, kind of things like that. And they're also often... Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I swear, John, you're doing the mind reading again. So I was going to ask you, do you believe in that the oft quoted thing of the villain never sees himself as the bad guy or the bad girl? But you've already answered. Right.
I just watched for like the 100th time a version of Christmas Carol.
Oh, one of my favorites.
Yeah, this is the one with George C. Scott that they did over in Shrewsbury.
John, that is my all-time favorite version on film. And I've actually done a tour of Shrewsbury to see where it's all filmed. It was absolutely brilliant. And I've actually met the man who played the younger Scrooge. Very nice man. Yeah, very nice man.
But Ebenezer Scrooge is a perfect example. He certainly is a villain in the beginning, but he does not see himself as a villain. As a matter of fact, he sees himself as many times the injured party. You know, I lent you money and now you don't want to pay me. What did I do to you? You know? And I always say when I watch this, I say, you know, everybody, they think of him as evil, but actually he's just disinterested.
That's so true.
To him, mankind is kind of a nuisance, and he's looking out for himself. And that's how villains are. Basically, they're looking out for themselves. They want respect. They want the money they think they have coming to them. What have you? It's always, like I say, they're often sociopaths where the suffering of others doesn't really enter into it.
I also like, going on to a more positive thing from discussing villains, is when you mentioned, for Butterworth, the fact that she feels, and it's very prevalent for the way things unfortunately still are now, women in male-dominated industries finding it very difficult to kind of get ahead and showing they have to prove themselves even more than their male counterparts. And I guess you're touching upon that with her character.
Right.
Which, it sounds, well, it's a negative situation, but you are being positive in the fact you're showing that this woman can excel.
Yeah, with Sally Butterworth, she's very attractive, but to her, this is more of a detriment than it is a benefit. And always part of her is trying to get past that, trying to be recognized for her own abilities, her own expertise, her own intelligence. And so this is kind of an interesting byplay with Tom Tom. There's a scene where they're both in a bar, and he introduces himself, for the first time in a hotel bar where they're both staying. And they have a very interesting back and forth patter where she's kind of half ignoring him, half attracted to him, but recognizing that I don't have time for you right now. I've got work to do, and good for you. He says to her at one point when she's leaving the bar, because they're both staying there, he says, "I'm on 8." And she pats his shoulder and says, "Good for you." It's like,
I like that. Very good.
She likes the interplay. She likes the flirtatious patter, but it's all business. I don't have time.
Now, obviously, you had success with the Project Suicide novel. Did you feel? Is it what I'm trying to ask is, as a writer, is there added pressure when it comes to writing a follow-up? Even if it's a separate entity to the original, right. So it's not like a continuation, trilogy sort of thing. Do you feel extra pressure? And if so, how do you get over that? And if you don't, wonderful.
Yeah, you do feel a little bit of pressure anytime you write anything, because I say to people frequently, especially writer friends who say that I've got this book, I've finished it, I want to get it out there. I'm going to self-publish it because I want people to see it. And I'm like, well, first thing you need to do is go through it several more times and make sure, get feedback from people that it's good or good enough. Because if you publish something that's not that good, not only are people not going to read it or want to read it, they're not going to want to read anything else you write.
Very true.
So, it's impossible to make a first impression twice. And so that with anything you write, there's always that feeling, I don't want to put it out there if it isn't the best I can do, because if people don't like it, it may turn them off to other things you've written or will write. So, yeah, there is a certain amount of that pressure.
Which I can, that's very good advice you've said also. I cannot think of, as soon as you said it, it happens a lot in life. This, you cannot make the first impression twice. It's the impression you make is the impression you will make. And it's incredibly good words to live by, of saying, look at it. Get somebody else to look at it as well to ensure that it is as good as you want it to be.
Yeah, it's not unusual for people to successful authors to revise a draft 6 or 8 times.
Wow.
Go through it completely, reading it again with a new set of eyes as much as possible, and making revisions where necessary to improve the flow, to improve word choice, verb choice, to cut material that is unnecessary, even if you like it. What's so-called killing your darlings. You've written a passage that you really think is great, but it slows down the narrative. Well, it's got to go. And it's that kind of thing. You do it over and over, and then when you get the editor, and professional editor is vital for fiction writing. When it gets to the editorial stage, the editor is going to do that as well with really fresh eyes, because you could never look at it like an outside reader. You have written it, you have read it too much. You can do only the best you can do. An outside editor who knows what they're doing and they know the genre is vital to improve it. I always say your editor is a love-hate relationship, kind of like a physical therapist. You like that they're helping you, but it's painful. They're making you change things that you thought were good.
Well, I think also, as soon as you talk about that, about the ability of having an editor to look at it, they're going to be brutally honest with you, because the problem I guess you'd have, and it's like with anything, but it'll be even more so with you. And I've spoken to other authors about this. It's your baby, right? So you want to, I guess metaphorically hold it and look after it and make sure it's safe, and you don't want anything to be changed about it. But yeah, I guess you've got to have a very thick skin. It's like when I've spoken to actors. I think you've got to handle rejection.
Yeah, you make a good point that other people have said. Books, a writer's work is his children, and to a certain extent, that's true. And so you could take offense that somebody is bad-mouthing one of your kids. But I think of it as more, I want to be told if my child's misbehaving. And that's where the editor comes in.
Mm-hmm. They're like the headmaster or the headmaster.
Yeah, I mean, they tell you where your children are messing up, and so you can correct it. That being said, the author has the final word. But if you're a smart author, you'll take your editor's suggestions 90% of the time.
And obviously, these are 2 separate books you've created, 2 separate novels. Would you ever want to create something that's like a trilogy, or well, not even say just a trilogy, something that runs across many different novels?
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually working. I'm about 95% done on a sequel to Project Suicide.
Ooh, can you tell us anything? Or I guess that might give too much away for those who've not read it.
Yeah, I'll just say the title is it's a working title right now. Basically, The Bad Penny, because a character from the original Project Suicide turns up and is causing mischief.
Nice.
For my protagonists, Amy and Deacon.
Mm-hmm. And can we have you on to discuss it when it comes out?
Absolutely.
Excellent.
I don't know. It's like I said, I'm in the middle of revising a couple other things, and I still got about 2,000-3,000 words to write on Bad Penny. But so probably sometime in the next couple of years it'll be out.
Cool. Well, I would love to talk to you about that, John. I really would. That'd be. I mean, I've enjoyed talking to you, today. I always enjoy talking to you. It's interesting. It gives very good insight into being an author. I mean, who would have thought that you would have had to go as far as like looking into doing a tour of an FBI building? Right. But by God, it obviously pays off. So it's well worth doing.
Like I said, you don't. It's one of those things where you don't have to do it, but it gives it just that little extra feel of realism when you do.
So, with regard to the genres you write in at the moment, would you ever see yourself doing like a full 360 and going to a completely different style, like say horror or complete sci-fi or something like that?
It's funny you should say that, because two of the drafts that I have completed and I'm working on revising, one of them is a horror. It's a horror thriller.
Cool.
And it's called, the working title is Ars Beneficia, which is Latin for the art of sorcery.
Nice.
And the other one is almost what you might call women's literature or chick lit, whatever, kind of like a Hallmark movie type of story about an older man who his wife dies, and she always was upset that they couldn't have children, and now he thinks about having a child, and he starts to get involved with what would be the process to do that. Not getting married to a young woman, but having a surrogate or whatever. And that's called And a Child Shall Lead Him. And I'm in the process of pitching that to some publishers right now.
Nice. Very nice. And have you found having to, did you find changing genres a challenge? Or was it just something that you were like, right, I want to see how this will pan out?
It wasn't that big a challenge to me because I have varied interests in what I read and in my choice in movies and stuff. I'll be as likely to watch, maybe not as likely, but I certainly enjoy many melodramas and romantic comedies and horror movies and horror books and stuff. So for me, it's just kind of changing your step a little bit to fall into a new cadence, because they're in my mind anyway. I can see the images, and so whether it's one genre or another, it's still basically the same process.
Nice. And I want to ask John, because we've obviously been discussing film. We have a mutual love of what I consider the greatest Christmas Carol version, which is the 1984 one with George C. Scott, which it's always nice to hear there's a fellow fan. Because obviously you talk about the sort of films you like, things like that. Is there anything at the moment that's particularly grabbed your attention film-wise?
You mean something that's out current or something that...
anything you have seen of late. I mean, current, yeah. I mean, like, say something like Oppenheimer or even, a total different end of the spectrum, Barbie.
Actually, I have not seen Oppenheimer, but I'm looking to see that. I have seen some, in the past, some TV movies and stuff about the Enola Gay and the making of the atomic bomb and all that stuff. As a matter of fact, I say this to your listeners, one of the greatest books I ever read, and it's a nonfiction book, was called Making of the Atomic Bomb by Richard Rhodes. Ooh. And if you like that type of history, it's a fascinating read. It takes you through all the development of discovering that this is even possible. The great physicists like Niels Bohr and all these guys discovering whether this is even possible, right through the development of the bomb and its use. So yeah, those kind of things I'm always interested in seeing when they come out. There's also one that is another historical movie. It's, I think, called The Killers of the Flower Moon.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I have not seen it, but I'm very interested in seeing it. I've heard good reviews from people I trust, and it's an interesting part of history that most people don't really know about.
Well, certainly. I mean, I've seen Oppenheimer, and it was just wow.
Was it good?
I cannot praise that film enough. I mean, I have a reasonably good knowledge of the Manhattan Project and what happened, how that came about. But even I was talking to somebody about this, and the strange thing is that even though I kind of knew what would happen, I was finding myself getting very, very tense watching parts of it. So
that's always a good sign.
it had the desired effect. But it was interesting when you were mentioning kind of previous things that have been made about it. I always liked, here I think it was called Shadow Makers, but in the US it's released under the name of Fat Man and Little Boy.
Yeah, I saw that as well, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good film. Really good. It was like a TV movie, wasn't it?
Paul Newman, correct?
Yeah, Paul Newman and Dwight Schultz. But yeah,
right.
That was a very good film. But yeah, I would highly recommend to anybody who gets a chance to see it to do so. Now, I feel that unfairly I've taken a bit away from you discussing that. So I want to take it back to you, John, and ask the question: would you ever write a historical novel?
I've thought about that. The most daunting thing about that is the research is even more extreme. Historical novels or high fantasy, where you build a world, there's a tremendous amount of architecture that has to be gone through. And so, yeah, I thought about doing a historical novel, maybe something, I'm a big military history fan, maybe something related to World War II or something like that. But so far, I have not disciplined myself to undertake that. Maybe I will. Well,
I will watch this space. I'd love to see you to do something like that. That would be very interesting. So, in relation to purchasing your books and learning more about what you're doing and getting in contact, John, how are our listeners best placed to do that, please?
Right. The easiest way to get to checkout time, and it's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It's distributed through Ingram, so any place you buy books, you can order it. But the easiest way to get to it is checkouttimenovel.com, all one word. And that'll take you directly to the Amazon page. And it's available in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle.
Excellent. And if you were trying to get the hands on Project Suicide?
Same thing, projectsuicidenovel.com.
Brilliant. And you have a webpage, don't you, so they can kind of follow what you're doing? Because you do a blog as well, which is always fun to read, because you send me some stuff so I can have a look at it.
It's thrillerjohnb.net.
Excellent. Well, I would suggest to all our listeners to get looking and reading those things, and more importantly, buying your novels, because trust me, they are well worth it. I mean, you've heard how good this guy is just by listening to this podcast.
Well, thank you very much. And one other thing I'd want to say to your listeners is, and this is true not just for my books, for any author that you like, after you read the book, post a Amazon review. It doesn't take much time. Give it a star rating, write 2 or 3 lines. Takes you 5 minutes. And it means a lot, not only because people look at those and decide whether or not they're going to buy the book, but also because places like Amazon decide how they're going to place your book promotionally based on the number and quality of the reviews. So, very positive thing. If you like a author, write a review.
You have heard it here, guys and gals. Obviously, do that. Yeah, I think that is a very valid point to make, because I think people don't appreciate how important it is to leave reviews.
Yes,
I really don't. So you've heard it here first. You've heard it here first. Leave those good reviews for John and his work. It is well deserved. So I would say, John, we have been talking of codswallop, as we say on this podcast, and I cannot thank you enough for coming on. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It was my pleasure, as always. I appreciate the opportunity. Always love to talk about my stuff.
Brilliant. Thank you, sir.